Welcome back to the HuntLeague Rifle Build Series. Let's dive right into my step-by-step process for mounting a rifle scope. First off, I level the rifle in a gun visor, a cradle, some kind of a clamp, and then I'll attach a small level to the barrel to use as a reference. Step 2, I'll mount the base rail or lower half of either the direct mount rings or your traditional scope rings, following the manufacturer's torque specs. Now pay attention to whether those numbers are for dry torque or wet torque. I used to add just a dab of blue Loctite here on the screws, but that can act as a lubricant and you can accidentally over torque and strip screws or part of the rifle if you're going off of dry torque specs. Step 3, once the bottom half of the rings are installed, I check 3 things. Clearance of the objective lens, is it making contact with the barrel? Clearance of the bolt, I'll run the bolt back and forth. Considering if you plan to add a magnification throw lever, you want to make sure there's clearance there. And then I will slide the scope forward and back, checking the mounting length and to see if there's any type of binding indicating that the rings may need to be lapped or maybe they weren't properly machined. In this rifle build series, we have already run into a few issues at this step in more than one occasion. And we've had to swap out either the rings, the base rails, or some type of components. So it's an important step. Step 4, if everything is looking good there, I lightly clamp the top rings on so that I can still manipulate the scope. I can still push it forward and back, and I spend a few minutes sliding the scope forward and backward, looking for that proper eye relief and natural point of aim. I'll test it in 3 different positions. I'll lay down prone, like with a bipod, and test it against my shoulder. Then I'll do seated, and I'll do standing, and I'll try to find that happy medium of where that distance goes. So again, lightly screw it down so that you have some ability to move it forward and backwards. This is another spot that you can run into issues, and you may need to make a pivot here. If you've been paying attention to this series, you know my preference is using the direct mount rings from Hawkins Precision. Specifically, they're long-range hybrid rings that have a 25 MOA of built-in cant machined into the rings. Now, those rings are action length specific, and they either work or they don't, depending on your scope's available tube mounting length. You may realize at this step that you need a different base rail, or you need to move one of the rings forward or backward, or go back to the drawing board and start over. This is an important step not to just settle on. If you can't close your eyes, address the rifle, and find that natural point of aim without having to move your face forward or backwards and you're like you're fighting the rifle, then you're never going to get comfortable with that setup. That fix could be adjusting your comb height, adjusting or adding to your length of pull, taking away. It could be swapping the base rail or rings, or in more extreme cases, you might even have to ditch the scope. Now, most scopes tend to fall in the 3 to 4 inch range of eye relief, with some being more forgiving than others in finding that sweet spot. So this is a critical step in the process. You want to slide this and make sure that you're going to be comfortable in just about any position. I love doing that where I just put it up to my face, close my eye, and I want to be able to open my eye and it's right there. I'm looking through the sweet spot. Now, once those steps are done, if everything is still looking good, I move to step 5. With the scope set for the proper eye relief, I lightly clamp the scope in place and I use a level on top of the turret to first get it aligned. Before I tighten down the screws, I confirm the reticle and rifle alignment with a flashlight and plumb bob, because the top turret isn't always perfectly square with the reticle. Sometimes that's just in the making of the scope where it's not perfectly level. Like you can have a level on top of your top turret where it's sitting nice and flush, but then your reticle can be slightly canted one way or the other. So in order to get that perfect level, I'll add a flashlight, I'll reverse it, you're shining it through the objective lens, I'll put it in dark room, and I'll hang a plumb bob, and it will shine the reticle on a back wall, and I can make sure that my reticle is perfectly level up and down with the rifle, the action, the mounting rail. Everything needs to be level. Once the reticle and the rifle are perfectly level, that's when I lock down the rings to the lower of either the ring manufacturer's torque specs or the optic manufacturer specs. Step 6, we're almost done, is attaching a level to the scope. That's right here, attaching a level to the scope. This is huge, especially if you plan to shoot long range. The Hawkins Precision long range hybrid rings, they have a level built into the rear ring. So I'm careful that when I lock that down, you know, because you can play with it a little bit as you screw it in. If they're not equal, that bubble level might be off. So I want to make sure everything is level. Again, I prefer that Hawkins Precision long range hybrid ring. I just don't think there's a better ring setup out there. But we can all argue about that, and you can have your favorites too. Now, with traditional rings, I just add an accessory bubble level like this to the setup while I still have the plumb bob and the level still clamped on the barrel. The last step for me is I measure the scope over bore height so I can enter it accurately into a ballistics app. I don't obsess about this measurement, as a tenth or even a quarter of an inch off here still represents usually less than an inch at 1,000 yards for many of your long range cartridges. So what are you trying to measure here? It's the center of the bolt to the center of the scope. Let's get a set of calipers and measure that distance. You can eyeball it from the side with a quick measurement. You can also use an equation of measuring the outside diameter of the scope tube and bolt, then divide those numbers in half and then add them together along with the distance between the bottom of the scope and the top of the bolt. Now, if you really want to be a perfectionist here, then you have to consider other factors such as, does the mounting system have any cant built into it? Long-range shooters and some rifle companies add cant or slope between the rifle and the scope. They do this so that you can take advantage of more elevation travel when you're dialing the turrets and moving your reticle. So if you have 20 or 30 MOA of cant or angle in the scope, are you supposed to measure the scope over bore height at the back of the scope, in the middle of the scope, at the front of the scope, or is it supposed to be the center of this as it slopes down towards the muzzle itself? One trick I've done for this is I'll wrap some tinfoil over the front objective. I'll poke a tiny hole in the center of the tinfoil with a little toothpick. Then I'll grab a sheet of paper with a vertical and horizontal line drawn on it. I'll center the line on the muzzle and then shine a light down the scope and mark the center of that line on that paper, and then I'll measure that. So I'm getting the center of the bore at the muzzle and the center of the scope, and I can use that number. For this Ruger American Gen 2 rifle, it doesn't have any MOA or cant built in, so it should be really close to the first measurements that I mentioned. I know this is the last step, but don't get hung up here. Again, just getting close here is all that you really need. Let me show you what I mean using the Arkin Ballistics calculator. Using ballistics data for a 6.5 Creedmoor at 1,000 yards, I can use 1.75 inch scope over bore height for the calculation, which shows 10.1 milliradians. If you change that value by a quarter of an inch and you go up from 1.75 to 2 inches, that calculation comes out, instead of 10.1, it comes out at 10.0. So it made a 0.1 milliradian of a difference at 1,000 yards. At this point, you're ready to hit the range and get your zero. That's the workflow. It's simple, it's repeatable, and it can help you avoid a lot of the problems and make proper equipment decisions along the way. So what tools do you need if you plan to do this at home? You need a rifle, vise, a clamp, a tripod, or a stand of some kind that's going to hold the rifle in place and keep it level. You need a torque wrench that measures in inch pounds, not foot pounds. Don't go grab the torque wrench for your vehicle. You need a little screwdriver that does inch pounds with an assortment of different bits. Now, I use an assortment of levels when I do this. One that clamps to the rifle barrel, one that it sits on top of the scope, and another that I put on the rail itself. I use a flashlight and a plumb bob setup. If you ever happen to stay in our basement guest room, you're always going to notice there's a strange little string tied to a washer that is always on our wall. Another tool is I need calipers for measuring that scope over bore height or any other thing that I'm trying to get specs on. Then last, I will occasionally use like a blue Loctite or some type of removable thread locker, but more often now, I'm just paying attention to the individual torque specs for each screw, which typically varies between 15 to 30 pounds on most of your scopes and actions and all that stuff. Now, most stores, when you buy a rifle or a scope setup, They will install the scope for you when you buy it right there. So why do I bother doing it myself? Well, here's 3 quick reasons. 1, more of my optics and scope ring purchases are coming online now, especially with more and more brands selling direct to consumer. 2, I've seen what happens when someone is in a hurry. A few years back, I had a store employee actually strip the threads out of a brand new rifle while mounting a base rail. Luckily, and still frustrating, it was a Ruger 1022, which is a great rifle just to keep with iron sights. So I just kind of said, it's okay, I'll just keep the iron sights. But if that was a precision hunting rifle, that would have been a nightmare and something I would still be pulling my hair out over. And the last thing is, I want to have those skills and confidence to be able to work on my own gear, whether that's a rifle or a bow. So I'm not completely dependent on a shop, and I want to have the confidence to be able to make adjustments in the field if something were to ever go wrong. Now, this video is part of the Hunting Rifle Build series where we're putting together and testing rifles designed for the Western hunter. We want lightweight, accurate, and built to perform at long ranges. Now, if you want to see how this mounting process fits into those builds and how the rifles actually shoot, go check out some of the other videos that we've done recently in this series. Now, I realize there are lots of tips and tricks out there for mounting a rifle scope. I want to keep this channel user-friendly and helpful for everyday hunters. I'm not coming at you as the expert, but just letting you know what has worked for me. If you have some tips and tricks that have worked for you, please contribute. Let us know what those are in the comments. I know you're going to have all sorts of people, from beginners to experienced people, tuning into this channel. So make your comments appropriate where everybody's going to understand. We all want to get better and have the ability to learn from one another, which is the beauty of the HuntLeague community. Now, you may notice I was messing with this Ruger American Gen 2 rifle for most of the footage in this video. I'm excited about this rifle and excited to bring it into this series, as it is often considered one of the best budget rifles, packed with features and known for its out-of-the-box accuracy. So let's see how it stacks up against some of the other ones. All right, let's get this rifle zeroed and let's see what it can actually do.